The moment security escorted Elias Ward off Aerosky Flight 22187, the airline thought they'd handled another difficult passenger. They didn't know they'd just removed the silent billionaire who controlled their technology backbone and $4 billion in funding. As Elias walked calmly through the terminal, his fingers dialed a number. Pull the investment, all of it, today. For years he'd built his empire in the shadows, while airlines like Aerosky perpetuated discrimination behind corporate smiles. The Carringtons could whisper their discomfort. Marla could check his first-class ticket twice, and security guard Brian Hale could mutter, "You people all they wanted." They never imagined their casual racism would trigger not just a viral video, but the systematic dismantling of their company and the birth of something better from its ashes. Elias Ward hadn't gone looking for this fight, but he was absolutely prepared to finish it. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Elias Ward checked his watch as he strolled through the airport terminal. 2 hours early, just as he preferred. He wore dark jeans, a simple grey button-down, and comfortable loafers. Nothing flashy, though the watch on his wrist cost more than most people made in a month. A lifetime of experience had taught him that blending in was often the wisest choice. Flight 2187 to Chicago, now boarding first class and priority members, announced a cheerful voice over the PA system. Elias approached the counter, passport and boarding pass ready. The gate agent glanced at his ticket and smiled. "Mr. Ward, we've upgraded you to first class based on your loyalty status. Enjoy your flight." "Thank you," Elias replied with a nod, shouldering his carry-on, a sleek leather bag containing his laptop and a single change of clothes. He travelled light, efficiently, without fanfare or entourage, just another businessman making his way through the world. As he moved toward the boarding line, he noticed an elderly woman struggling with her roller bag. The wheel had caught on the carpet's edge, and she tugged at it with increasing frustration. "May I?" Elias asked, approaching her with a warm smile. The woman, white-haired and perhaps in her 70s, looked up with relief in her pale blue eyes. "Oh, thank you, young man. This silly thing has a mind of its own." With gentle efficiency, Elias freed the wheel and lifted her bag over the troublesome carpet edge. "There you go. These airport carpets can be tricky." "Such a gentleman," she remarked, patting his arm. "My grandson could learn a thing or two from you." From the corner of his eye, Elias caught a sharp glance from a man in an expensive suit, tailored to perfection with cufflinks that glinted under the fluorescent lights. The man's face tightened into something between suspicion and disdain before quickly looking away. Elias pretended not to notice. He'd seen that look countless times before. Boarding proceeded smoothly. Elias found his seat in First Class 3A, a window seat. He stowed his bag in the overhead compartment and settled in, pulling out his phone to check his messages before takeoff. "Excuse me?" A tight voice interrupted his concentration. Elias looked up to see the man who had glared at him earlier, now standing in the aisle beside his seat. Behind him was a woman with professionally highlighted blonde hair and a pearl necklace that probably cost as much as a used car. "I believe you're in our row," the man said, his tone implying something more than a simple observation. Elias glanced at his boarding pass. "I'm in 3A. We're in 3B and C, the woman chimed in, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'm Beatrice Carrington, and this is my husband, Leslie." Elias nodded politely. "Elias Ward." Leslie Carrington made no attempt to introduce himself properly. Instead, he exhaled through his nose and gestured for Elias to stand so they could access their seats. Elias obliged, stepping into the aisle to let them through. As Beatrice settled in next to him, she subtly shifted her purse to her lap, instead of placing it under the seat, clutching it a bit too tightly. Leslie, now seated on the aisle, flagged down a passing flight attendant with a snap of his fingers. "Excuse me, miss," he called. I'd like to check if there are any other seats available in first class. His eyes flickered briefly toward Elias. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Marla, followed his gaze. Her customer service smile faltered slightly as she looked at Elias. "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully booked in first class today," she replied to Leslie. Then, with a curious tilt of her head, she turned to Elias. "May I see your boarding pass, sir?" Elias kept his expression neutral as he handed over his boarding pass and ID. "Is there a problem?" "Just routine checks," Marla said, examining his documents with unusual scrutiny. "We need to make sure everyone is in their assigned seats." Elias noticed she hadn't asked to see the Carringtons' boarding passes. "Everything seems to be in order," Marla finally said, returning his documents. Her tone was stiff, professional, but tinged with something that made Elias's stomach tighten slightly. As Marla moved on, Leslie leaned toward his wife and whispered something. Beatrice nodded, her eyes darting briefly to Elias before looking away. The plane gradually filled. A flight attendant moved through the cabin offering pre-departure drinks. When she reached their row, she served the Carringtons first, then hesitated before handing Elias his water. Boarding complete, came the announcement over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure." Just as Elias was beginning to relax, Marla returned to his row. "Sir, could I see your boarding pass again?" Elias raised an eyebrow but reached for his phone where his boarding pass was stored. "Is there a specific concern I should know about?" "Please, just comply with the request, sir," Marla replied, her tone hardening. "I'm simply asking for clarification," Elias said calmly. "This is the second time my documentation has been checked, while others—" "He's being uncooperative," Marla said to Leslie, as if seeking confirmation. Leslie straightened in his seat. "He's been aggressive since he sat down. My wife and I are feeling quite intimidated." Elias blinked in genuine surprise. "I've barely spoken 10 words to you." "There's that tone again," Beatrice murmured, just loud enough for Marla to hear. Something cold settled in Elias's chest as he realized what was happening. He had experienced versions of this before, but usually with more subtlety, not this blatant fabrication. "I'll need to speak with the captain," Marla said, turning sharply and heading toward the cockpit. A few rows back, a young, college-aged woman with braided hair slowly raised her phone, angling it to capture what was unfolding. Moments later, the cockpit door opened. The captain spoke briefly with Marla, who gestured toward Elias's row. The captain nodded and picked up the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We'll be ready for departure shortly." 2 men in airport security uniforms boarded the plane. They walked directly to Elias's row. "Sir," the taller one said, "we need you to gather your belongings and come with us." The cabin fell silent. All eyes were on Elias now. "On what grounds?" Elias asked, his voice soft but clear. "The flight crew has reported disruptive behavior," the second guard said. "Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Elias looked at the Carringtons, who were both suddenly very interested in their phones. He looked at Marla, who stood with arms crossed, avoiding direct eye contact. "I haven't been disruptive," Elias stated. "I'd like to speak with the captain directly." "That won't be necessary," the first guard said. "Your non-compliance is delaying departure for everyone. Please gather your things." The weight of dozens of stares pressed on Elias from all sides. Some passengers looked uncomfortable, others impatient, and a few were recording with their phones. With deliberate calmness, Elias stood and retrieved his bag from the overhead compartment. As he stepped into the aisle, the guards positioned themselves on either side of him. "This way," the taller guard said, placing a firm hand on Elias's upper arm. As they escorted him toward the exit, Elias maintained his composure. He walked with his head high, face expressionless, though his mind raced with calculations and implications. Just before reaching the door, the second guard, a muscular man with a military-style haircut and a name tag reading Brian Hale, leaned in close. "You people always think the rules don't apply," he muttered, barely audible to anyone but Elias. Elias held the man's gaze for a long, silent moment before continuing down the jetway and into the terminal. Once clear of the gate area, Elias moved to a quiet corner near a window overlooking the tarmac. He watched as his flight pushed back from the gate without him on board. Only then did he reach for his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, selected a number, and waited. When the call connected, he spoke softly but with crystal clarity. "It's me. I need you to pull the investment. All of it. Today." He paused, listening. "Yes, I'm certain. I'll explain later." As he ended the call, his phone chimed with a notification. The video was already spreading across social media. Man being escorted off a plane while doing nothing wrong. Elias slipped his phone into his pocket and walked toward the exit. Behind him, a storm was brewing, but his face revealed nothing. Not yet. Newark, New Jersey, 1985. A 7-year-old. Elias sat on the stoop of a modest apartment building, working through math problems that were years beyond his grade level. His mother, Diana Ward, watched from the window as she prepared dinner after her 12-hour shift as a hospital administrator. "You're going places, baby," she'd often tell him. "Just remember who you are when you get there." The memory faded as Elias entered his penthouse office in downtown Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city that had both challenged and rewarded him. The space was minimalist, but tasteful. No flashy displays of wealth, just quality and purpose in every detail. "They're waiting for you in the conference room," said Marlon Cho, Elias's executive assistant and closest confidant since their MIT days 20 years ago. Marlon handed Elias a tablet displaying the viral video from the plane. The footage had amassed over 3 million views in just 6 hours. "Did they identify you yet?" Marlon asked. "Not by name," Elias replied, "but it's just a matter of time." They walked together to the conference room where Elias's legal team had assembled. The atmosphere was tense, charged with both outrage and purpose. "Mr. Ward," began Talia Winters, his chief legal counsel, "we've drafted cease and desist letters to Aerosky Airlines regarding their slanderous statements about your behavior, but I suspect you have something else in mind." Elias nodded, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Aerosky Airlines doesn't know who they removed from that plane today. It's time they found out." He turned to the screen at the front of the room, which displayed the holdings of Ward Global Ventures, a private equity firm that operated almost entirely out of the public eye. Among the dozens of companies and startups listed, one name stood out: SkySync Technologies. SkySync provides the software infrastructure for over 60% of U.S. airlines, Elias explained, including Aerosky's entire fleet. They also depend on our capital investments to maintain their international certifications. "And they have no idea you own the controlling interest," Marlon added. "Correct. And now I'm pulling both the technology licenses and the funding." The room fell silent for a moment as the implications set in. "Sir," one of the younger attorneys ventured, "that would effectively ground their entire operation within weeks." "I'm aware," Elias replied simply. Back at Aerosky's corporate headquarters, the day had been proceeding like any other. In his corner office, with its ostentatious aviation memorabilia, CEO Victor Langford was reviewing quarterly projections with his executive team. "These numbers are promising," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Our new route expansions are exceeding expectations." His assistant knocked and entered without waiting for a response. "Sir, you need to see this." She handed him a tablet displaying the viral video. Victor's face remained impassive as he watched, but a vein in his temple began to pulse. Get Kendra in here, he ordered. Now! Kendra Shaw, Aerosky's head of PR, arrived moments later. Tall, immaculately dressed, with a reputation for handling crises with cold efficiency, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had buried worse stories than this. "I've seen it," she said before Victor could speak. "We're already drafting a statement about our commitment to passenger safety and proper protocols." "Not good enough," Victor snapped. "This needs to disappear. I don't want another discrimination. Lawsuit." "The video has already gone viral," Kendra countered. "Trying to bury it will only make it worse. We need to control the narrative." As they argued strategy, Beatrice Carrington entered, still wearing the same pearl necklace from the flight. As a board member of Aerosky and Victor's longtime ally, she had immediate access. "Victor, you need to get ahead of this," she said without preamble. "That man on the plane, I didn't recognize him at first, but I think he's someone important." Victor dismissed her concern with a wave. "He's nobody. Just another angry passenger who didn't follow instructions." He turned back to Kendra. "Issue the standard statement. Say we're investigating the incident, or whatever the usual line is." As Kendra left to manage the PR response, Victor's phone rang. It was the CFO, his voice tight with alarm. "Something's happening with our shares," he reported. "They're being sold off in large blocks by an unknown entity. We've dropped 4% in the last hour alone." Victor frowned. "That's odd timing. Keep an eye on it." Back in his office, Elias watched a financial dashboard as Aerosky's stock began its downward slide. It was just the beginning. "Marlon, I need the files on Aerosky's previous discrimination cases," he said, turning away from the screen. Marlon pulled up a secure folder on his tablet. 8 settlements in the past decade, all with strict NDAs. On Elias's desk sat a framed A photograph of his mother, Diana Ward, smiling proudly at his MIT graduation. Beside it was an old bus ticket preserved in a small frame. The sight of it triggered another memory. Montgomery, Alabama, 1994. 15-year-old Elias was visiting relatives with his mother. They boarded a Greyhound bus, and the driver had told Diana to move to the back, despite there being open seats. "In the front, it's not the 60s anymore," Diana had said firmly, refusing to move. The driver threatened to kick them off. A white passenger had intervened, saying, "Let them sit where they want." Only then did the driver back down. That night, Diana had told Elias, "Sometimes you have to draw a line, even when it costs you something." The memory faded as Elias focused back on the present moment. "It's happening again," he murmured, touching the frame of the bus ticket. "Sir?" Marlon looked up. "Nothing," Elias replied. "Did you find anything on a woman named Ava Grayson?" Marlon nodded. Former compliance officer at Aerosky raised concerns about biased passenger removal policies 3 years ago. She was let go shortly after and hasn't worked in aviation since. "Find her," Elias said. "I think we need to talk." Meanwhile, at Aerosky headquarters, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The CFO burst into Victor's office without knocking. "We're losing access to SkySync's systems," he reported, his face pale. "Our entire booking infrastructure, flight planning software, maintenance scheduling, it's all being revoked." "What?" Victor stood up. "That's impossible. We have contracts. Apparently there's a clause allowing immediate termination under certain conditions. And there's more. Our private equity funding is being pulled. $4 billion, Victor. Gone." For the first time that day, genuine fear flashed across Victor's face. Who's doing this? Who has that kind of power? The CFO handed him a folder. The order came from Ward Global Ventures. Victor stared at the name, not immediately making the connection. "Ward? Who the hell is that?" "Elias Ward," the CFO said quietly. "The man we had removed from Flight 2187 this morning." The blood drained from Victor's face as recognition dawned. The quiet guy in 3A? That was Elias Ward? Yes. And he owns the technology that keeps our planes in the air. Victor sank back into his chair. Get him on the phone, right now. But Elias Ward had no intention of taking their calls. Not yet. In a modest apartment in Brooklyn, Ava Grayson was packing her belongings. After 3 years of struggling to rebuild her career, she had finally accepted a corporate compliance position in Seattle. Far below her qualifications, but at least in her field. Her phone rang with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Ms. Grayson, my name is Marlon Cho. I represent Elias Ward of Ward Global Ventures. He'd like to meet with you regarding Airosky Airlines. Ava's hand tightened around the phone. I signed an NDA. I can't discuss my time there. Mr. Ward is aware of the NDA. He's prepared to have his legal team review it for any potential loopholes. In the meantime, he'd like to offer you a consulting position to help identify patterns of discrimination in commercial aviation. The pay is substantial. Ava hesitated. Why me? Because you tried to do the right thing once before, Ms. Grayson. Mr. Ward respects that. After Ava agreed to meet, Marlon returned to Elias's office. She'll see you tomorrow morning. Elias nodded, turning his attention back to his computer. What's the status on the Aviation Safety Commission application? Moving forward, Marlon replied. Though I'm curious, why apply now? You've avoided public roles for years. Elias's gaze drifted to the photograph of his mother. Because sometimes silence is complicity. A notification pinged on Elias's phone. It was a message from an unknown number with a link to an old job application. His application to Airosky Airlines from 15 years ago. He'd been fresh out of MIT, brilliant but naive, applying for a software engineering position that he was overqualified for. At the bottom was a handwritten note. Background doesn't match our culture. Reject. It was signed by a much younger Victor Langford. Elias stared at the image, a sardonic smile forming on his lips. The universe had a strange sense of humor sometimes. Marlon, he said, do you remember when I applied to Airosky right after graduation? Marlon looked up. The job you never heard back about. Of course. I just found out who rejected me. Elias showed him the image. Victor Langford himself. That's poetic, Marlon said after a moment. It's more than that, Elias replied. It's a pattern, one that's about to be broken. He stood, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. They dragged me out of a seat I already bought. Now I'll show them what it feels like to lose control of the cockpit. By evening, Airosky's stock had dropped 12%. Emergency meetings were being held in boardrooms and government offices. Airline industry analysts were scrambling to understand the sudden shift in the market. And Elias Ward, the man who had been silently building an empire while others underestimated him, sat in his home office reviewing the plans for what would come next. On the television in the corner, a news anchor was reporting on the viral video. Sources have identified the passenger as Elias Ward, founder of Ward Global Ventures. Airosky Airlines has issued a statement saying they are looking into the incident but declined further comment. Elias turned off the TV. The first pieces were moving into place. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. Dawn broke over New York City as Ava Grayson arrived at the Ward Global Ventures building. The security guard checked her ID and directed her to the executive elevator. Mr. Ward is expecting you, he said with a respectful nod. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Marlon was waiting to escort her to Elias's office. Thank you for coming, Elias said, rising to greet her. I appreciate your time, Ava. Studied him carefully. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone louder, more obviously powerful. She took the seat he offered. Your name wasn't well known at Airosky, but your company's technology was everywhere. We just didn't know who was behind it. I prefer it that way. Elias replied. Or I did until yesterday. He explained his situation and what he hoped to accomplish. As he spoke, Ava's expression shifted from skepticism to cautious interest. "So you want me to help you dismantle Aerosky?" she asked when he finished. "No," Elias corrected. "I want you to help me transform it, or replace it with something better." Ava considered this. "You know they'll fight back. They have political connections, media allies." "I'm counting on it," Elias said with a slight smile. "That's part of the plan." As Ava left with a preliminary contract to review, Elias turned his attention to the latest reports from his financial team. Aerosky was in freefall, their stock down 30% since the previous day, their operations scrambling as key systems became increasingly unstable. Victor Langford was making desperate calls to regulators, claiming unfair business practices. But Elias had anticipated this. Every step he'd taken was meticulously legal, leveraging clauses buried in contracts that Aerosky's own lawyers had approved years ago without understanding their implications. By noon, the story had evolved. Financial? News networks were reporting on the connection between the viral video and Aerosky's plummeting value. Social media was ablaze with speculation and outrage. "Mr. Ward," Marlon said, entering with fresh reports, "Trevor Lynn from GNN is requesting an exclusive interview." "Not yet," Elias replied. "Let them wonder a little longer." As the day progressed, more details emerged about Aerosky's history of discrimination. Anonymous sources, many likely encouraged by Ava Grayson's network, began sharing stories with journalists about their experiences with the airline. By evening, the narrative had completely shifted. Aerosky wasn't just dealing with one PR disaster. They were facing a reckoning for years of systemic issues that had been carefully hidden from public view. In his home that night, Elias sat on his balcony overlooking Central Park. The lights of the city glimmered below, a testament to human ambition and ingenuity, and also to the inequalities that persisted despite all that progress. His phone rang. It was Marlon. "They know everything now," Marlon reported. "Aerosky's board is in emergency session. There's talk of asking Victor to step down." "And the new aviation logistics system?" Elias asked. "Ready for implementation. The partner airlines are eager to switch, especially after today's news." Elias nodded to himself. "Good. Tomorrow we go public with the full plan." He paused, looking out at the city. It's time they understood this isn't about revenge. It's about changing the system. As he ended the call, Elias thought again of his mother's words. Sometimes you have to draw a line, even when it costs you something. For Aerosky, that cost was about to become very clear. Morning sunlight slanted through the blinds of Aerosky's executive boardroom as Victor Langford stared in disbelief at the financial report in front of him. The numbers didn't lie. Their stock had plummeted nearly 20% overnight, and the downward spiral showed no signs of stopping. "How the hell did we miss this?" Victor slammed his palm on the polished mahogany table. "Someone explained to me how one passenger we removed from a flight now threatens our entire operation." The CFO, James Peterson, cleared his throat nervously. "It appears that Elias Ward's holdings are far more extensive than anyone realized. The license revocations for our tech systems are just the beginning. The private equity funding, $4 billion, has been officially withdrawn as of 9 a.m. this morning." Victor's face flushed crimson. "This is absurd. One entitled passenger throws a tantrum and we're supposed to cave. Call legal. We'll fight this on breach of contract." "We've already consulted with legal," Peterson replied, his voice tight. "The contract gives Ward Global Ventures full discretion to withdraw funding with minimal notice under certain conditions that, unfortunately, we've met." Kendra Shaw sat quietly at the far end of the table, observing the panic with calculating eyes. As head of PR, she'd weathered many storms for Eroski, but this hurricane was different. This wasn't just a crisis to manage, it was an opportunity. "Victor," she finally spoke, her voice measured and cool, "we need to issue a formal apology to Mr. Ward." "It's the only way to begin damage control," Victor scoffed. "Apologize and admit wrongdoing? Absolutely not. This was a routine removal of an uncooperative passenger. Our staff followed protocols." "The video evidence suggests otherwise," Kendra countered, "and the public is firmly on his side. Justice for Elias is trending nationwide." "I don't give a damn what's trending," Victor snapped. "We stand by our crew's decision. Issue the standard statement about passenger safety being our top priority." As the meeting continued, Kendra excused herself briefly, stepping into the hallway to make a private call. The contact in her phone was labeled simply CV. "Cameron, it's Kendra. I think it's time we had that discussion about the future of Eroski leadership." Cameron Voss had been Victor's rival for the CEO position 5 years prior. As the current COO, he'd been biding his time, waiting for Victor to stumble. That time had finally come. Meanwhile, across town, Ava Grayson sat in a secured office at Ward Global Ventures, combing through internal Eroski documents. Years of working in compliance had taught her where to look for the smoking guns. "Found another one," she announced, sliding a file across to Trevor Lynn, the investigative journalist. Elias had brought in email chain from 2019, senior leadership explicitly discussing how to identify and flag non-standard passengers for additional scrutiny. Trevor whistled low. "That's corporate speak for racial profiling if I've ever heard it." "It gets worse," Ava continued, pulling up another document. "Look at this training material. They instruct gate agents to watch for urban speech patterns and unusual attire in business or first class. It's blatant." Trevor adjusted his glasses as he scanned the document. "This is dynamite. How did they keep this quiet for so long?" "NDAs, settlements and intimidation," Ava replied grimly. "I tried to raise concerns when I worked there. They buried my reports and then buried my career." Trevor nodded thoughtfully. "Time for a resurrection, then." By mid-afternoon, Trevor's initial story had broken online, exclusive, inside Aerosky's secret passenger profiling system. The article included redacted versions of the emails and training materials, careful not to reveal Ava as the source while still preserving the saw. Damning content, the reaction was immediate. Aerosky's share price, already weakened, dropped another 15% within hours. Social media erupted with calls for boycotts. Former passengers began sharing their own stories of discriminatory treatment. Back at Aerosky headquarters, the crisis had escalated to all-out panic. "Sir, we're getting calls from every major news outlet," Victor's assistant reported, her usually composed demeanor cracking, "and the FAA has requested all documentation related to our passenger removal policies for the past 5 years. Victor loosened his tie, feeling the walls closing in. Where the hell is Kendra? She should be handling this. But Kendra was in Cameron, Voss's office, reviewing a strategy to present to the board, one that ended with Victor's removal and Cameron's ascension, with Kendra as his second in command. In another part of the building, a junior flight attendant named Sarah Jensen stared at her computer screen in the crew lounge. The internal message board was buzzing with activity, with current and former staff sharing their experiences with the company's unwritten red flag practices. The unofficial profiling system that targeted certain passengers, particularly people of color in premium cabins. Sarah had witnessed it firsthand, but had always been too afraid to speak up. Now, with anonymity provided by the internal forum, she began typing her own account of what she'd seen over 3 years with the airline. What she didn't realize was that dozens of other employees were doing the same thing, and that several were forwarding these accounts directly to news outlets. By evening, Aerosky was bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Their customer service lines were overwhelmed with cancellations. Their social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. And a group of Wall Street analysts had just downgraded their stock from hold to sell. In a private conference room, the board of directors convened an emergency session without Victor present. "The question isn't whether Langford stays," said Roland Whitman, the board chairman. "It's how quickly and quietly we can remove him without making this worse." Another board member leaned forward. "What about this Elias Ward? Who is he really, and why does he scare us this much?" "Because he has the power to destroy this company with a phone call," Roland replied gravely. "And so far, he's only given us a taste of what he can do." Victor, unaware of the board's meeting, retreated to his office and poured himself a generous scotch. His phone rang. Cameron Voss calling to check in on how he was handling the crisis. "Don't worry about me, Cam," Victor said, the alcohol loosening his tongue. "I'm not going down because of some entitled new—" He caught himself, but the slur had already escaped. What Victor didn't know was that Kendra had advised Cameron to record the call. The incriminating audio was now safely stored in her personal files, insurance for the next phase of her plan. As night fell over the city, Elias sat in his home office, watching the destruction of Eroski unfold on multiple news channels. "Days so," headline crawled across the bottom of one screen. "Passenger boycott grows. Mothers with biracial children join protest against Eroski." The camera cut to a woman holding a young boy's hand as she spoke passionately to the reporter, if that's how they treat a successful businessman like Mr.
"Ward, what chance does my son have?"
Marlon entered with a fresh pot of coffee. "Quite a day," he observed, pouring 2 cups. Elias nodded, accepting the coffee. "And we're just getting started." "The media wants your statement," Marlon reminded him. "They've been calling non-stop." "Let them wait," Elias replied. "I won't speak until the time is right. Let them drown in their own silence for a while longer." As he spoke, his phone lit up with a text from Ava. "You need to see this." It was a video of a mother and her biracial son at the airport, turning away from the Eroski check-in counter and tearing up their tickets. The caption read, "My son deserves better. Boycott Eroski. Stand with Elias." The video had already been shared over 1 million times. Elias set down his phone and gazed out at the city lights. "I won't speak yet," he repeated softly, "but when I do, they'll wish they'd never heard my name." "The Sea," headline of Trevor Lynn's comprehensive exposé, practically screamed from computer screens and smartphones across the country. The pattern of prejudice. How Eroski Airlines systematically removed passengers of color. The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, meticulously researched, corroborated by multiple sources, and devastating in its conclusions. It connected Elias Ward's removal to dozens of similar incidents over the past decade, all of which had been quietly settled and buried by Eroski's legal team. This was never about one incident or one passenger, Trevor wrote in the piece. This was about a corporate culture that normalized discrimination and punished those who questioned it. Within hours of publication, the article had been shared by celebrities, politicians, and business leaders across the political spectrum. The consensus was clear. Eroski's actions were indefensible. That same morning, Beatrice Carrington appeared on National Morning News, apparently determined to salvage her reputation. "I felt threatened," she insisted, her pearl necklace gleaming under the studio lights. "My husband and I were simply trying to enjoy our flight when this man became confrontational." The host, to her credit, wasn't having it. "Mrs. Carrington." The video clearly shows Mr. Ward sitting quietly. At no point does he raise his voice or make any threatening gestures. You weren't there? Beatrice countered, her smile tightening. There's such a thing as reverse racism, you know. White people can be victims too. What Beatrice didn't realize was that a group of internet researchers had already begun digging into her past. By noon, screenshots of her old social media posts were circulating widely, posts filled with racial slurs and derogatory comments about minorities in white spaces. As Beatrice's interview concluded, her phone buzzed with an urgent text from her publicist. "Get off air now, check your Twitter." Mentions too late. The damage was done. Beatrice Carrington, board member of Airline and wife of Leslie Carrington, was now the face of the scandal's latest chapter. At Ward Global Ventures, Ava Grayson was preparing for her next move. With Elias's backing, she had assembled a team to digitize and organize Airline's leaked training materials, including a particularly damning video that had been recorded during a staff training session 3 years earlier. This segment is titled Identifying Potential Passenger Concerns. The trainer in the video explained to a room full of flight attendants and gate agents, pay close attention to urban speech patterns, unusual attire in business class, or passengers who seem out of place in premium cabins. The subtext was unmistakable. Ava's hands trembled slightly as she watched. She remembered sitting in that very training, raising her hand to question the guidelines and being told afterward that she wasn't a team player. "Are you okay to proceed with this?" Elias asked gently, noticing her reaction. Ava squared her shoulders. "More than okay. This needs to be seen." The training video was released at precisely 2 p.m., strategically timed to dominate the afternoon news cycle. Within an hour, it had been played on every major network, accompanied by commentary from civil rights lawyers, aviation experts, and former Airline employees who confirmed its authenticity. By late afternoon, Airline's stock had fallen another 12%, bringing the total loss to nearly 45% of its value in just 2 days. Meanwhile, in a modest home in the suburbs, Henry Grayson, Ava's father, and a former Airline pilot, watched the unfolding scandal with mixed emotions. 15 years earlier, he had been one of the airline's most respected captains, until a single incident changed everything. During a routine flight, Henry had corrected a dangerous error made by his white co-pilot, a man with powerful connections within the company. Days later, Henry was called into a meeting where he was accused of emotional instability and creating an unsafe work environment. Despite his impeccable record, he was fired and effectively blacklisted from the industry. The doorbell rang, pulling Henry from his thoughts. When he opened the door, Elias Ward stood on his porch. Mr. Grayson?" Elias said, offering his hand. "I'm Elias Ward. Your daughter suggested I speak with you." Henry regarded him warily, but invited him in. "You're the man from the plane, the one they're talking about on the news." "I am," Elias confirmed, taking a seat in Henry's living room. "But I'm here to talk about you, actually." "Me?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "What could I possibly have to do with all this?" "Everything," Elias replied. "What happened to you 15 years ago was part of the same pattern that's continuing today. The difference is, now we have the power to change it." He explained his vision, a comprehensive aviation reform initiative that would address systemic discrimination through new training protocols, reporting systems, and accountability measures. And he wanted Henry to be a consultant on the project. "Why me?" Henry asked. "I haven't flown in 15 years. "Because you understand what's at stake," Elias said simply, "and because your experience matters." Henry shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ward. I left that world behind a long time ago. It took everything from me once already." Elias nodded, understanding the hesitation. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. "Don't do it for them," he he said quietly. Do it. For her. They both knew he meant Ava and all the others who had faced similar injustices. Back at Aerosky headquarters, Kendra Shaw was meeting secretly with a private investigator. I need dirt on Elias Ward, she instructed. Everyone has skeletons. Find his. The investigator nodded. Any particular areas to focus on? Past relationships? Financial irregularities? Anything we can use to shift the narrative? Kendra slid an envelope across the table. This is just the beginning. There's more if you deliver results. What Kendra didn't know was that Trevor Lynn had sources everywhere, including inside Aerosky's PR department. By evening, he knew about her smear campaign and had already alerted Elias. Let them come, Elias said when Trevor called with the warning. They won't find anything that hurts me. But their attempt will make an interesting addition to your next article. That night, Aerosky's leadership held another emergency meeting. The atmosphere was grim, with board members openly discussing the possibility of bankruptcy if the situation continued. We need to settle with Ward, one executive argued, whatever it takes. He's not returning our calls, another replied, and his lawyers say he's not interested in settlement talks. Victor Lankford, who had managed to hold on to his position for now, slammed his fist on the table. This is extortion. He can't just destroy a company because he didn't like how he was treated on one flight. In the corner of the room, Cameron Voss exchanged a knowing glance with Kendra. Victor's days were numbered, and they both knew it. As discussions continued, a junior assistant burst into the room, her face pale. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this right now. She turned on the large screen at the front of the room where a financial news channel was breaking a major story. Elias Ward reportedly developing new airline venture, the reporter continued. Sources close to Ward Global Ventures confirmed that proprietary aviation technology is being routed to a new entity registered as New Sky Airways. Industry analysts suggest this could represent a direct competitor to established carriers with state-of-the-art systems and a focus on equity and service. The boardroom fell silent as the implications sank in. Elias Ward wasn't just punishing Aerosky. He was planning to replace them. In a different part of town, a group of minority pilots were meeting with lawyers from Ward Global Ventures. These were pilots who had experienced discrimination at Aerosky over the years, passed over for promotions, subjected to extra scrutiny, or fired for minor infractions that white pilots routinely got away with. Mr. Ward is prepared to fully fund a class action lawsuit, the lead attorney explained. But more importantly, he wants to offer all of you positions with a new venture he's developing. The pilots exchanged skeptical glances. They'd heard promises before. Why should we trust him? Asked one veteran captain. Because unlike Aerosky, Mr. Ward knows what it's like to be judged for the color of his skin rather than the content of his character, the attorney replied. And because he's putting $100 million behind this initiative. That got their attention. The next morning, Victor Langford made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. He instructed his assistant to arrange a private meeting with Elias Ward. Tell him I want to discuss resolution options, Victor said. Person to person, no lawyers. The message was delivered, but Elias's response was brief and pointed. You already had your moment to hear me. You chose to remove me. By afternoon, the class action lawsuit had been filed, generating yet another wave of negative press for Aerosky. The plaintiffs included not just the pilots, but former flight attendants, gate agents, and even passengers who had experienced discrimination. As media coverage intensified, Kendra Shaw made her final move. Using a secure anonymous email account, she sent the recording of Victor's racial slur to every major news outlet in the country. Within hours, the audio was playing on a continuous loop across television, radio, and internet platforms. Aerosky CEO Victor Langford caught using racial slur to describe Elias Ward. The headlines blared. The board didn't even need to meet to make their decision. By 5 p.m., Victor Langford had been terminated effective immediately, with a terse statement from the company disavowing his comments. In his penthouse apartment, Elias watched the news coverage of Victor's downfall on a large television screen. As the clip of the slur played yet again, he picked up the remote and turned off the TV. "Now," he said quietly to the empty room, "it begins." The morning after Victor Langford's racial slur went public, Aerosky's stock plummeted an additional 22% within the first hour of trading. The company had lost nearly half its market value in just 3 days, a catastrophic collapse that financial analysts were already calling the Ward effect. In the gleaming glass towers of Wall Street, traders stared at their screens in disbelief as the numbers continued to fall. Even those who had predicted trouble hadn't anticipated such a swift and brutal decline. "Is Aerosky going to survive this?" asked a CNBC anchor, her voice grave as she addressed a panel of aviation industry experts. "That remains to be seen," replied a silver-haired analyst. "But with their technology licenses revoked, their funding pulled, and now this PR nightmare, it's difficult to imagine a scenario where they emerge intact." At Aerosky headquarters, panic had given way to resignation. Employees whispered in hallways, updated their resumes at their desks, and took personal items home, just in case. The atmosphere was that of a sinking ship, with everyone quietly preparing for the worst, while maintaining a brittle facade of normalcy. In the executive boardroom, an emergency meeting had been called. Board members filed in with grim expressions, many having flown in overnight from across the country. Roland Whitman, the board chairman, called the meeting to order with a somber tap of his knuckles on the polished table. "I think we all understand the gravity of our situation," he began, his voice tight with controlled stress. "The events of the past 72 hours have brought us to the brink. Our stock is in freefall, our partners are distancing themselves, and our CEO has been recorded using a racial slur to describe the very man who now holds our fate in his hands." The room remained silent, the gravity of their predicament hanging heavy in the air. "Victor Langford must be removed immediately," said Thomas Bailey, one of the oldest board members. "There can be no debate on this point." Nods of agreement circled the table. "And Beatrice Carrington as well," added another board member. "Her television appearance and those social media posts have made her position untenable." Beatrice, who was notably absent from the meeting, had been placed on a leave of absence the previous evening after her racist social media history had gone viral. Her husband, Leslie, had also gone silent, neither returning calls nor appearing in public. "Agreed," Roland said. "But removing them won't be enough. We need to demonstrate meaningful change, and we need to do it quickly." As the discussion continued, Kendra Shaw sat quietly at the far end of the table, her expression carefully neutral, despite the satisfaction she felt within. Everything was proceeding exactly as she had planned. Victor was finished. Beatrice would soon follow, and in the chaos that remained, she intended to rise. When a junior executive suggested they needed new leadership with a fresh perspective, Kendra allowed herself a small, calculated intervention. "If I may," she said, her voice measured and calm amid the panic, "I believe Cameron Voss has the experience and the temperament to guide us through this transition. As COO, he's already familiar with our operations, and he hasn't been implicated in any of the recent unpleasantness." Several board members turned to look at Cameron, who maintained a somber, determined expression, one he and Kendra had practiced the night before in preparation for this moment. "I'm willing to step in as interim CEO," Cameron offered, his voice grave with artificial reluctance. Not because I want the position, but because I believe in this company and what it can be with the right guidance. The vote was swift and unanimous. By noon, press releases announced Victor Langford's termination and Cameron Voss's appointment as interim CEO. Kendra Shaw was elevated to Executive Vice President with expanded responsibilities, effectively making her the second most powerful person in the company. Cameron's first official act was to draft a formal statement condemning discrimination and promising a full review of company policies. His second act, performed behind closed doors, was to instruct Kendra to reach out to Elias Ward. "We need to stop the bleeding," he told her. "Find out what it will take to get him to reinstate the technology licenses and funding." Kendra nodded, already composing the approach in her mind. "Leave it to me." That afternoon, a sleek private jet, one of the few Aerosky aircraft still operating at full capacity, was dispatched to New York. On board was a leather portfolio containing a proposal that Kendra believed would appeal to Elias Ward: reinstatement of all technology licenses and funding in exchange for a formal public apology from Aerosky, a substantial financial settlement, and a newly created position for Elias as strategic advisor to the board. The jet landed at a private airfield near Elias's estate in upstate New York. A courier delivered the portfolio directly to the front gate, where Marlon Cho accepted it with a cordial but non-committal thank you. Inside the house, Elias was on a video call with a group of former Aerosky employees, people of color who had experienced discrimination during their time with the airline. Each shared their story, passed over for promotions, subjected to random security checks, assigned to less desirable routes, or pushed out entirely under dubious circumstances. "What happened to me on that plane wasn't an isolated incident," Elias told them after listening intently to their experiences. "It was part of a pattern that's gone unchecked for too long." As the call concluded, Marlon entered with Aerosky's proposal. "They sent a private jet with this," he said, placing the portfolio on Elias's desk. Elias glanced at the leather-bound folder without opening it. "Send it back." "Without reading it?" Marlon asked, surprised. "They had their chance to do the right thing," Elias replied. "Now it's my turn to decide what happens next." Marlon nodded, understanding the message. "I'll have it returned immediately." That evening, a news alert buzzed on phones across the country. Aerosky proposal rejected. Elias Ward returns offer unopened. The rejection sent another shockwave through the aviation industry. Aerosky's stock, which had briefly stabilized following the leadership changes, dropped another 8% in after-hours trading. Meanwhile, in a quiet neighborhood outside Atlanta, Henry Grayson sat on his porch, deep in thought. Since Elias Ward's visit, he had been wrestling with whether to join the aviation reform initiative. 15 years of bitterness had hardened his heart against the industry that had destroyed his career and tarnished his reputation. His phone rang. It was his daughter, Ava. "Have you decided yet?" she asked, skipping pleasantries. Henry sighed. "I don't know, Ava. What good would it do? The system is broken." "That's exactly why we need you," Ava replied. "Mr. Ward isn't just talking about changing things, he's actually doing it. He has the resources and the influence to make real change happen." "And what happens when the spotlight moves on to something else?" Henry challenged. "What happens when people forget about the man who got thrown off a plane and everything goes back to business as usual?" "It's not going back," Ava insisted. "Not this time." After they hung up, Henry walked inside and opened the closet where his pilot's uniform still hung, preserved in plastic. He ran his fingers over the wings pinned to the jacket, wings he had earned through years of hard work and dedication, only to have them stripped away unjustly. "Don't do it for them," Elias had said. "Do it for her." Henry picked up his phone and dialed a number. In Washington, D.C., the rapidly escalating situation had caught the attention of powerful people. Several senators with ties to the airline industry and donors connected to Airosky were growing concerned about the implications of one man wielding so much influence over a major carrier. Senator William Parker, whose campaign had received substantial contributions from Airosky's corporate PAC, called a press conference to express his concerns about market stability and the potential impact on consumers. "While discrimination has no place in American business," Parker stated, carefully threading the political needle, "we must also consider the thousands of jobs at stake and the essential service that Airosky provides to communities across our nation. I am calling for a measured approach that addresses legitimate concerns without destabilizing an entire industry." What the senator didn't mention was the frantic call he had received from Roland Whitman earlier that day, pleading for political intervention to help save the airline. Within hours of the senator's statement, a coordinated campaign began across certain news outlets questioning whether Elias Ward had too much power and whether his actions constituted a dangerous precedent of private retribution against public companies. Elias watched these developments with a calm that unnerved those around him. Rather than responding directly to the political pressure, he focused on the next phase of his plan. "Marlon," he said as they reviewed the day's developments, "what's the status of the safety system license?" Marlon pulled up a document on his tablet. "According to our contracts, the revocation takes full effect in 48 hours. After that, Aerosky loses access to our collision prevention AI." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "And the alternatives available to them?" "Nothing comparable in the short term," Marlon replied. "Our system is integrated into their entire fleet. Replacing it would take months, if not years." Later that evening, as Elias was preparing for bed, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marlon. "You need to see this now." Attached was a legal document that had just been filed by Aerosky's new leadership. It was a formal threat claiming that if Elias didn't reinstate access to the safety system within 48 hours, they would hold him personally responsible for any incidents that occurred as a result. The implication was clear. If a plane went down, they would blame him. Elias read the document twice, his expression hardening. The move was desperate, cynical, and completely in line with the corporate culture he was fighting against. "They still don't understand who they're dealing with," he said to himself, setting the phone aside. Tomorrow would bring a response they weren't expecting. The headline dominated every major news outlet by morning. Aerosky claims Elias warned endangering passengers by withholding safety technology. It was a calculated move that shifted the narrative overnight. Suddenly, social media was ablaze with new hashtags. Greer's corporate vendetta and airline lives matter began trending as Aerosky's PR machine worked overtime to paint Elias as a vindictive billionaire willing to risk lives for personal revenge. Several opinion pieces appeared simultaneously across different publications, all questioning the ethics of using safety systems as leverage in a corporate dispute. The coordinated nature of the campaign suggested significant resources behind it. A last-ditch effort by Aerosky to salvage its reputation by damaging Elias's. "They're trying to make me the villain," Elias remarked to Marlon as they reviewed. The morning's coverage, predictable but effective. Before Marlon could respond, his phone rang. It was Ava Grayson, her voice tense with urgency. "There's been an incident," she reported. Aerosky Flight 753 to Denver experienced a sudden altitude drop about an hour ago. They're saying it was related to the navigation system. Elias's expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. Casualties? No. The pilot managed to stabilize the aircraft. Everyone's safe, but passengers were terrified. It's all over social media already. And they're blaming our system, Elias concluded. Yes, Ava confirmed. Cameron Voss is giving a press conference in 30 minutes, and the advance word is he'll be directly calling you out for endangering lives. After ending the call, Elias sat in silence for a moment. Then he turned to Marlon. Get me the flight data from our system and call Trevor Lynn. Tell him I'm ready to talk. On camera today. The timing of the incident was suspicious. The safety system was still fully operational. The license revocation wouldn't take effect for another day. Either this was a genuine technical issue being opportunistically exploited, or something more sinister was at play. By mid-afternoon, Cameron Voss stood before a forest of microphones, his face grave with practiced concern. Today's incident demonstrates the very real human cost of Mr. Ward's vendetta against our airline, he declared. While we thank God no one was injured, this near miss serves as a sobering reminder of what's truly at stake. We are calling on Mr. Ward to put passenger safety above personal grievances and reinstate the critical systems our aircraft depend on. The performance was compelling. Cameron managed to appear both righteous and reasonable, a corporate leader concerned only with public safety. The fact that the incident had occurred while the system was still fully operational wasn't mentioned. As Cameron continued his statement, televisions across the nation suddenly cut to breaking news. Elias Ward. To give first public interview since Aeroski incident, in a studio across town, Elias sat opposite Trevor Lynn, both men composed and serious as the red light on the camera signaled they were live. Mr. Ward, thank you for joining us today, Trevor began. I think the question on everyone's mind is simple. Are you putting airline passengers at risk by withdrawing your technology from Aeroski? Elias met the question directly. No, I am not, and I'd like to explain why. With calm precision, he outlined how his company's technology had actually prevented countless potential incidents over the years. He explained that the system was still fully operational and would remain so for another 24 hours, contradicting Aeroski's implications. Today's incident occurred while our system was functioning normally, Elias stated. In fact, our logs show that it was our collision prevention AI that helped the pilot recover from the sudden altitude drop, a drop that appears to have been caused by human error in the cockpit, not by any technological failure. He then revealed something the public didn't know. His company had already arranged for a third-party safety system to take over when the license expired, ensuring there would be no gap in protection for passengers. My issue is not with the travelling public, Elias continued. It's with a corporate culture that has systematically discriminated against people of colour, both passengers and employees, while hiding behind policies and procedures designed to shield them from accountability, Trevor pressed further. But critics say you're using your financial power to wage a personal war against Aeroski. How do you respond to accusations that this is simply about revenge? If standing up against discrimination and demanding accountability is considered revenge, then we have a deeper problem in our society than I thought, Elias replied. I didn't create this situation. Aeroski did when they chose to remove me from that flight for no legitimate reason, when they chose to cover up past incidents rather than address them, and when they chose to threaten me rather than acknowledge their mistakes. The interview continued for 30 minutes, with Elias maintaining his composure while systematically dismantling Aeroski's narrative. By the time it concluded, the public conversation was already shifting. Social media exploded with supportive messages. Current and former pilots from other airlines began speaking out, confirming the reliability of Ward's safety systems and questioning Aeroski's version of events. A popular black veteran pilot with a large following posted a video that quickly went viral. Elias Ward's technology has saved more lives from behind a screen than Aeroski ever did in a cockpit. I've flown with his systems for a decade, and they've never failed. This is about a corporation trying to avoid accountability, nothing more. As the interview replayed across various networks, Kendra Shaw watched from her office at Airosky. Her expression unreadable. The strategy to paint Elias as reckless had backfired spectacularly. His calm, reasoned responses made Airosky's accusations seem desperate and manipulative by comparison. Her phone rang. It was Cameron Voss. "We need a new approach," he said without preamble, his voice tight with frustration. "Ward just demolished our entire narrative in 30 minutes. "I'm already working on it," Kendra replied, her mind calculating the next move. She had underestimated Elias Ward once. She wouldn't make that mistake again. After hanging up, Kendra stared out her office window at the Airosky corporate campus below. The company was still salvageable, she believed, but not with Cameron Voss at the helm. His performance today had been adequate but uninspiring. If Airosky was going to survive this crisis, it needed leadership that could match Elias Ward's strategic thinking, leadership like hers. Meanwhile, across town, Beatrice Carrington was growing desperate. Confined to her luxury penthouse as the scandal raged, she had watched her social standing collapse overnight. Friends weren't returning calls. Charity boards were quietly removing her name from their websites. The exclusive social circle she had cultivated for decades was disintegrating around her. "We need to fight back," she told her husband Leslie, who sat slumped in an armchair, still wearing the previous day's clothes. "Find something on Ward. There must be something we can use." Leslie looked up, his eyes hollow with defeat. "It's over, Beatrice."
Our Airosky stock is worth half what it was a week ago. The board has made it clear we're not welcome back. What exactly are we fighting for?"
"Our reputation," Beatrice snapped. "I refuse to be cancelled by some tech billionaire with a racial chip on his shoulder." She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. A former flight attendant who had once mentioned an uncomfortable encounter with a male passenger years ago. Beatrice had barely paid attention at the time, but now she wondered if that passenger might have been Elias Ward. It was a desperate move, but Beatrice was a desperate woman. The next morning, a small right-wing blog published a story with the headline, "Former Flight Attendant Accuses Elias Ward of Harassment." The story was thin on details and relied heavily on anonymous sources, but it was enough to catch the attention of certain news outlets looking for a fresh angle on the ongoing saga. By noon, the accusation had spread across several platforms. Though most mainstream outlets were treating it with appropriate skepticism, the timing was suspicious, and the lack of concrete details made it difficult to verify. What Beatrice hadn't counted on was the flight attendant herself. Now a mother of 3 living in Oregon, coming forward to set the record straight. "I never accused Elias Ward of anything," Jessica Taylor stated firmly in a video posted to her social media accounts. The incident being described involved a different passenger entirely, and it was resolved years ago through proper channels. Mr. Ward has always been respectful in my experiences with him, and I won't allow my name to be used in this smear campaign. The attempted character assassination collapsed almost immediately, further damaging Beatrice's already tarnished reputation. More importantly, it exposed the desperate tactics being employed against Elias, generating additional public sympathy for his cause. As the week progressed, the movement against Airosky continued to grow. Ava Grayson organized a protest outside the airline's headquarters, expecting perhaps a few hundred people to attend. Instead, thousands showed up, former employees, civil rights activists, and ordinary citizens outraged by the discrimination that had been exposed. They carried signs reading, "Airosky, no-fly zone for racism, and justice for Elias, our justice for all." News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the scene to millions of viewers nationwide. In Washington, D.C., the political winds were shifting as well. The Senate Commerce Committee, responding to public pressure, announced hearings on discrimination in the airline industry. Elias Ward was invited to testify. The hearing room was packed when Elias took his seat at the witness table. Cameras flashed as he placed his prepared statement on the table before him. Senator James Williams, the committee chairman, called the hearing to order with a bang of his gavel. "Mr. Ward," Williams began, "you've created quite a stir in recent weeks. Some call you a crusader for justice, others a corporate raider using social issues as cover for financial manipulation. I hope today's testimony will help us determine which narrative is closer to the truth." Elias leaned forward slightly. "Senator, with respect, both narratives miss the point. This isn't about me. It's about a pattern of discrimination that has gone unchecked for too long in an industry that serves the public trust." For the next hour, Elias methodically outlined the evidence his team had gathered: internal documents, statistical patterns of passenger removals, testimony from former employees, and his own experience. His delivery was calm but powerful, devoid of the emotional outbursts or grandstanding that often characterize such hearings. "Gentlemen," he concluded, "I don't expect you to take my word for any of this. I've provided documentation for every claim I've made today. The question isn't whether discrimination exists in this industry. The evidence clearly shows it does. The question is what we as a society are prepared to do about it." As Elias finished, a hushed silence fell over the hearing room. Several senators appeared visibly moved, while others looked uncomfortable, perhaps considering their own ties to the industries being scrutinized. Back at Ward Global Ventures, Marlon had made a significant discovery. While reviewing Airosky's financial records, particularly the complex web of shell companies used for various investments, he uncovered evidence that Beatrice and Victor had been funneling company money to lobbying groups with explicit anti-diversity agendas. Moreover, they had used these same shell companies to quietly settle multiple harassment and discrimination cases over the years. "This goes beyond corporate bias," Marlon told Elias when he returned from Washington. "They were actively funding hate while using company resources to cover up abuse." Elias reviewed the documents carefully. "The evidence was damning and completely actionable. Forward this to the Department of Justice," he instructed, "and give Trevor Lynn the background information, not the documents themselves, but enough to start asking the right questions." That evening, Elias sat alone in his study, reviewing the events of the past 2 weeks. What had begun as a personal humiliation had evolved into something much larger, a genuine movement for change in an industry that had operated by its own rules for too long. His phone rang. It was Henry Grayson. "I've been thinking about your offer," Henry said without preamble. "And?" Elias prompted when Henry fell silent. "I'm in," Henry finally replied. "Not because I believe the system can change, but because my daughter does. And if there's even a chance she's right, I want to be part of it." Elias smiled. "I'm glad to hear it. We've got a lot of work to do." As they discussed next steps, Elias's other line beeped with an urgent call from Marlon. "Turn on the news," Marlon said when Elias switched over. Now, Elias clicked on the television to see breaking news banners across the screen. Federal agents raid Airosky headquarters. The camera showed FBI agents leading several people out of the building in handcuffs. Among them was Victor Langford, his face ashen, as he was guided into a waiting vehicle. "The Department of Justice moved quickly," Marlon explained. "Apparently they've been building a case for some time, and our evidence was the final piece they needed." As the screen showed Victor Langford being placed in the back of an FBI vehicle, Elias turned off the television. The wheels of justice were finally turning, but there was still much work to be done. The real challenge, rebuilding something better from the ashes of corruption, was just beginning. 3 weeks after Victor Langford's arrest, a fleet of black town cars pulled up to a converted warehouse on the outskirts of New York City. The building, once an abandoned aircraft maintenance facility, had been transformed into a sleek, modern space, its exterior restored to industrial chic perfection, its interior reimagined as a cutting-edge headquarters. Elias Ward stepped out of the lead car, dressed in a simple charcoal suit. Behind him came Marlon Cho, tablet in hand as always, followed by Ava Grayson and her father, Henry. They were joined by a diverse group of executives, engineers, pilots, and aviation specialists, the core team of what would soon be revealed to the world. Inside the warehouse had been converted into an open-concept office with a massive hangar space visible through glass walls. In that hangar stood a gleaming aircraft, its pristine white fuselage emblazoned with a sleek blue logo, New Sky Airways. "Is everything ready?" Elias asked, surveying the space with quiet satisfaction. Marlon nodded. "Press will arrive in 30 minutes. Livestream is set up. Social media campaign launches the moment you make the announcement." As the team took their positions, Elias walked to a wall displaying framed photographs, one of his mother, another of the infamous flight where he'd been removed, and between them, a simple framed motto, "Everyone deserves a seat." Soon, the IT warehouse filled with journalists, industry analysts, and invited guests. Camera crews set up equipment, while photographers jockeyed for position. The anticipation was palpable. Rumors had been swirling for days about Elias Ward's next move. At precisely 10 a.m., Elias stepped onto a small stage. Behind him, a massive screen displayed only the New Sky Airways logo against a cloud-dotted sky. He surveyed the crowd, took a deep breath, and began. "Good morning. Thank you all for coming. 3 weeks ago, I was forcibly removed from a commercial flight because of the color of my skin. Today, I'm here to announce that sometimes when the system fails you, the answer isn't just to fix it, but to rebuild it entirely." With that, the screen behind him came to life, displaying renderings of aircraft, terminals, and technology interfaces. As Elias continued, he outlined his vision. New Sky Airways, a revolutionary aviation company built from the ground up with equity, safety, and integrity as its foundational principles. "This isn't just another airline," Elias explained. "This is a complete reimagining of what air travel can and should be. From our hiring practices, to our customer service protocols, to the technology powering our aircraft, everything has been designed to create an experience that respects the dignity of every person who steps on board." He went on to detail the innovations that would set New Sky apart. State-of-the-art collision avoidance technology, transparent algorithms for security screenings that eliminated racial bias, and a corporate structure that incentivized ethical behavior at every level. "And leading this effort as our Chief Operating Officer," Elias announced, gesturing to his right, "is someone who understands better than most the cost of standing up for what's right. Please welcome Ava Grayson." Ava stepped forward, her posture confident, but her eyes revealing the emotion of the moment. 3 years after being pushed out of the aviation industry for raising concerns about discrimination, she was returning. Not as a compliance officer, but as a top executive. "Thank you, Elias," she said, taking her place at the podium. "When I was fired from Airosky for questioning their practices, I never imagined I'd have the opportunity to help build something better. Today marks not just a new chapter for me, but a chance to create the kind of aviation company I always believed was possible." Ava announced her first initiative as COO, a comprehensive hiring program targeting underrepresented pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, and administrators across the country. The pipeline would include partnerships with aviation schools and historically black colleges and universities, as well as scholarship opportunities for students from underserved communities. "Our goal isn't just diversity for its own sake," she explained. It's about building a workforce that reflects the passengers we serve and creating an environment where everyone can thrive based on their talents and dedication, not their appearance or background. As Ava concluded her remarks, Elias returned to the microphone to make another major announcement. The establishment of a $100 million aviation scholarship fund named in honor of Henry Grayson and Diana Ward, Elias's late mother. This fund will support the next generation of diverse aviation professionals, Elias said, because representation matters not just in the boardroom, but in the cockpit, the cabin, the maintenance hangar, and every aspect of this industry, Henry. Grayson, standing near the stage, blinked back tears as the audience applauded. 15 years after being pushed out of the profession he loved, his name would now be associated with creating opportunities for others who might have been excluded. The press conference continued with technical presentations on New Sky's aircraft and systems, followed by a Q&A session where journalists pressed for details on timelines, routes, and financial projections. "When will the first New Sky flight take off?" asked a reporter from Bloomberg. "We're targeting 60 days from today," Elias replied. "And yes, that's ambitious, but we've been working on this longer than most people realize." Another reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Ward, critics are already saying this is just about revenge against Eroski. How do you respond?" Elias smiled slightly. "If building something better, more equitable and more innovative is revenge, then I suppose I'm guilty. But I prefer to call it progress." As the formal presentation concluded, attendees were invited to tour the facility and view the prototype. Aircraft, industry analysts moved through the space, many clearly impressed by the technology and attention to detail evident in every aspect of the operation. "This isn't just a publicity stunt," murmured one veteran aviation consultant to her. "Colleague, Ward has built something legitimate here. Eroski should be very, very worried." Across town, in the Eroski headquarters, the mood was indeed grim. Kendra Shaw sat in what had briefly been her office as executive vice president, watching the New Sky live stream on her tablet. Her expression remained neutral, but her mind raced with calculations and contingencies. The door opened and Cameron Voss entered without knocking, a small but telling sign of how their power dynamic had shifted. "In recent days?" "You've seen the announcement?" he asked, gesturing toward her tablet. "Of course," Kendra replied coolly. "Impressive operation. He's been planning this for months, maybe years." Cameron paced nervously. "This isn't just competition, it's existential. If he can deliver what he's promising, we won't survive. Not with our reputation in tatters and our stock in freefall." Kendra studied Cameron thoughtfully. In the 3 weeks since his appointment as interim CEO, he had proven disappointing. Reactive rather than proactive, more concerned with optics than strategy. She had backed the wrong horse. "We need to respond," Cameron continued. "Release a statement about our own diversity initiatives or something." "That ship has sailed," Kendra replied. "Empty promises won't cut it anymore. We need concrete action and, frankly, different leadership." Cameron stiffened. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Before Kendra could respond, her assistant knocked and entered with urgency. "You both need to see this." She turned up the volume on the office television, where a news anchor was reporting breaking news in the ongoing Aerosky scandal. Following Elias Ward's announcement of New Sky Airways, major travel booking platforms report mass cancellations of Aerosky reservations, with many customers specifically citing their switch to New Sky once it becomes operational. The assistant handed Kendra a printout. Preliminary numbers show a 40% drop in forward bookings over the past 3 hours alone. Cameron sank into a chair, his face ashen. "This can't be happening." Kendra's phone buzzed with a text from a board member. "Emergency meeting, 4 p.m. She knew what that meant. Cameron's brief tenure was about to end. The question was, who would replace him? Meanwhile, Trevor Lynn was putting the finishing touches on his latest project, a multi-part documentary series titled Grounded, the story of Elias Ward. With unprecedented access to Elias and his team, Trevor had captured the behind-the-scenes story of the past month, from the initial incident on the plane to the creation of New Sky Airways. "This final segment needs something," Trevor muttered to his editor as they reviewed footage, "something personal that brings it full circle." As, if on cue, his phone rang. It was Elias. "I have something you might want to include," Elias said. "I've just met someone I think you should interview." Hours later, Trevor sat across from an elderly white woman with kind eyes and silver hair, the same woman Elias had helped with her bag at the airport before boarding the fateful flight. "I saw everything," Martha Wilson explained, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I was seated a few rows behind Mr. Ward. When those security guards came on board, I wanted to speak up, but I was afraid, and I've carried that shame ever since." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "When I recognized him on the news, I reached out. I wanted him to know that not everyone on that plane was blind to what happened. I never knew kindness could cause such a storm." The interview provided the perfect emotional conclusion to Trevor's documentary, humanizing a story that had become increasingly about corporate maneuvers and systemic change. As the first episode prepared to air, another drama was unfolding in the lives of Beatrice and Leslie Carrington. Their spectacular fall from grace had accelerated following Victor Langford's arrest, and the revelations about their involvement in funding hate groups through shell companies. Legal troubles mounted, as former employees, emboldened by recent events, came forward with lawsuits alleging discrimination and wrongful termination. The Carrington social circle had evaporated. Their club memberships quietly revoked, their names removed from charity boards and donor lists. In their penthouse apartment, now listed for sale to cover mounting legal fees. Beatrice struggled to comprehend how completely their world had collapsed. "How did this happen?" she asked her husband, who sat staring vacantly at financial statements showing their dwindling resources. "A month ago, we had everything." Leslie looked up, his expression hollow. "We had the illusion of everything, Beatrice, and all it took was one man in seat 3A to show how fragile it all was." The next morning, as New Sky's announcement continued to dominate headlines, Elias stood on the tarmac of a private airfield watching test flights of their first aircraft. Beside him, Henry Grayson observed with a professional's eye, occasionally making notes on technical adjustments. "What do you think?" Elias asked as the plane completed another smooth landing. Henry nodded approvingly. "She's solid, the avionics. Package is unlike anything I've seen. Responsive, intuitive." "Your engineers did remarkable work," Elias smiled. "They'll be glad to hear that from you." They walked together toward the hangar, where preparations continued for New Sky's inaugural flight. Engineers huddled over computers, mechanics fine-tuned equipment, and trainers worked with the first class of flight attendants, a diverse group selected not just for their service skills, but for their commitment to the company's mission. "You pray?" "No," Henry said thoughtfully. "When you first approached me about this, I thought you were naive. That one man, even with your resources, couldn't change an industry this entrenched in its ways." "And now," Elias prompted. Henry gestured to the activity around them. "Now I think maybe I was the naive one for believing things couldn't change." Later that afternoon, Elias took a rare moment for himself, driving alone to a quiet spot overlooking the Hudson River. He parked and sat on a bench facing the water, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and purples. His phone buzzed with a text from Marlon. "First New Sky tickets go on sale tomorrow. Projections show will sell. Out within hours." Elias smiled to himself, then put the phone away. Success was gratifying, but in this moment of solitude. His thoughts turned to his mother. What she would have thought of all this. How proud she might have been. "I drew the line, Mum," he whispered to the fading light. "Just like you taught me." As dusk settled over the city, Elias Ward looked out at the horizon, not at what had been, but at what was yet to come. 5 years later, a young black girl, no more than 7 years old, clutched her mother's hand as they moved through the row. Sleek terminal of New Sky Airways main hub. Her eyes were wide with wonder, taking in the soaring architecture and the diverse faces of the staff moving efficiently through their duties. "Look, Mum," she exclaimed, pointing to a wall display showing the cockpit crew of their upcoming flight. "The pilot looks like Grandpa." Her mother smiled, squeezing her hand. "That's Captain Ramirez. And yes, honey, that's one of the special things about New Sky. Their pilots come from all kinds of backgrounds." As they approached the gate, a flight attendant greeted them warmly. "First time flying with New Sky?" she asked. Noticing the girl's excitement? "Yes," the child replied. "I want to be a pilot when I grow up." The flight attendant knelt to her level. "Well, we have a program you might be interested in. It's called Future Flyers. Would you like some information for your mom?" As the attendant provided details about New Sky's youth aviation program, a silver-haired man observed the interaction from a discreet distance. Elias Ward, now in his early 50s, had perfected the art of visiting his own company incognito. Baseball cap pulled low, casual clothes, no entourage to draw attention. These periodic, unannounced visits allowed him to see New Sky as passengers. Experienced it. Not as the polished presentation executives prepared for him, but as the living, breathing reality of his vision. What he saw pleased him. In 5 short years, New Sky had transformed from a bold experiment into one of the top-rated airlines in the world, with the most diverse workforce in aviation history and customer satisfaction scores that competitors could only dream of achieving. More importantly, it had changed the conversation about what was possible in the industry. Other airlines had been forced to re-examine their own practices, several implementing versions of New Sky's unbiased security protocols and inclusive hiring. Initiatives. Elias's phone vibrated in his pocket, a reminder of his next commitment. He took one last look at the little girl still chatting animatedly with the flight attendant, then slipped away unnoticed. An hour later, Elias stood before a classroom of high school students in one of New York's underserved neighborhoods. This was how he spent much of his time these days, mentoring young entrepreneurs, speaking at schools, and working with the scholarship recipients of the Grayson Ward Fund. "The most valuable resource you have isn't money," he told the attentive students. "It's your perspective, the unique way you see problems and solutions based on your own experiences." A hand shot up. "But Mr. Ward, you had money. That's how. You were able to start your own airline when Aerosky discriminated against you." Elias nodded, acknowledging the point. "Yes, I had resources that most people don't. But money alone doesn't build anything worthwhile. What turned that moment of injustice into something positive was having a vision for something better and the determination to make it real." After the session, the school principal walked Elias to his car. "You've been coming here every month for almost 4 years now," she observed. "Long after the headlines faded, most successful people make one appearance and consider their community service done." Elias smiled. "This was never about headlines for me. It's about legacy, not just what we build, but who we help to build the future." As his driver navigated through the city streets, Elias reviewed messages on his tablet. Among them was an update from Ava Grayson, who had recently launched her own consulting firm focused on bringing equity to all forms of transit, buses, trains, subways, using the principles that had proven successful at New Sky. The Chicago Transit Authority has agreed to implement our training program, Ava reported. That makes 17 major transit systems now using our equity framework. The skies were just the beginning. Elias sent a brief note of congratulations, proud of how far Ava had come from a blackballed compliance officer to a respected industry leader in her own right. Hers was exactly the kind of success story that validated their work. Another message came from Marlon, now running international expansion for New Sky. He had just concluded a TED Talk titled Rewriting Flight Paths, Justice and Infrastructure, and attached a link to the video, which was already trending online. Your influence extends far beyond aviation now, Marlon wrote. Companies across dozens of industries are adopting similar reforms after seeing what we accomplished. They're calling it the Elias effect. As the car continued its journey, Elias's thoughts drifted to those who had stood on the other side of history. Airline still existed, though in dramatically reduced form. A regional carrier with a fraction of its former routes and revenue. After multiple leadership changes and a Chapter 11 reorganization, it had emerged as a cautionary tale taught in business schools worldwide. Victor Langford had served 14 months in federal prison for financial crimes related to the shell companies and misappropriation of corporate funds. Upon his release, he had retreated from public life, occasionally spotted at second-tier industry events, but largely forgotten. A news alert pinged on Elias's tablet. Former Airline CEO Victor Langford spotted at New Sky IPO event. The accompanying photo showed a grey-haired Victor watching from the periphery as New Sky executives rang the opening bell. His expression empty, no anger, no resentment. Just the vacant stare of a man witnessing the consequences of his own failings. Elias dismissed the alert without dwelling on it. Victor Langford belonged to the past, and Elias's focus remained firmly on the future. His schedule for the afternoon included a planning meeting for the unveiling of a memorial statue at New Sky's headquarters, a powerful bronze sculpture honoring all wrongfully profiled travelers. The design featured abstract figures of diverse backgrounds standing tall and unbowed, surrounding a central inscription, "Never again removed for who you are." The artist, a renowned sculptor whose own father had experienced discrimination while traveling in the 1960s, had created a piece that captured both the pain of past injustices and the hope of a more equitable future. Elias had been moved to tears when he first saw the completed design. Later that evening, Elias met with Marlon for their weekly dinner, a tradition that had endured through all the changes of the past 5 years. Their friendship, forged in their MIT days and strengthened through countless challenges, remained one of the constants in Elias's life. "I've been thinking about Ghana," Elias said as they finished their meal. "It's time I took that trip." Marlon raised an eyebrow. "The one your mother always talked about? Tracing her family roots?" Elias nodded. "I've been putting it off for years, always too busy with one thing or another. But I think it's time."
A vacation would do you good, Marlon agreed. When was the last time you took more than 2 days off? This wouldn't be a vacation, Elias corrected him. More of a pilgrimage, something I need to do for myself, not for New Sky or the Foundation or anything else. 2 weeks later, Elias found himself sitting on the porch of a small guest house in a coastal village in Ghana. No security detail, no business meetings, no speaking engagements, just a man reconnecting with a part of his heritage his mother had always wanted to explore. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. Local children played soccer in the distance, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibilities and achievements momentarily lift from his shoulders. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, he was simply present, neither planning the next move nor reflecting on the past, just existing in the moment,
watching the same sun that had illuminated his ancestors' lives sink below the horizon. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, a new sky flight cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet. In row 12, a young white man in his 20s settled nervously into his seat, his first time flying. Beside him sat an older black woman who noticed his white-knuckled grip on the armrest. "First flight?" she asked kindly. He nodded, embarrassed. "That obvious, huh?" "Everyone's a first-time flyer once," she assured him. "You're in good hands. New Sky has an excellent safety record." "Thanks," he said, his grip loosening slightly. "I guess I'm being silly." "Not at all," she replied. "Flying can be intimidating." "I'm Grace, by the way." "Tom," he responded with a shy smile. As the plane banked gently toward its destination, they fell into easy conversation, two strangers sharing a journey, their interaction unmarked by tension or suspicion. Just two people experiencing the simple human connection that travel at its best can facilitate. It was a small moment, unremarkable in many ways, but it represented everything Elias Ward had fought for. A world where people could simply be people, where one's appearance didn't determine how they were treated, where everyone truly deserved a seat. 1 week later, Elias stood on that same Ghanaian porch, watching his final sunset before returning to the United States. His phone rang. Marlon checking in. "How's the pilgrimage going?" Marlon asked. "It's been clarifying," Elias replied, his voice reflective. "I needed this more than I realized." "The company's still standing without you," Marlon assured him. "Though everyone's asking when the boss is coming back," Elias chuckled. "Soon enough. But I've been thinking, maybe it's time to step back a bit, let the next generation take more of the reins." "Planning your legacy?" Marlon asked, only half joking. "In a way," Elias admitted. "Everything we've built, New Sky, the foundation, the reforms, none of it depends on me anymore. That's how it should be." As the last sliver of sun disappeared beyond the horizon, Elias thought about the journey that had brought him here, from a seat on an airplane to a movement that had changed an industry. One moment of injustice, transformed through determination and vision into something that would outlast him. In the growing darkness, Elias Ward smiled to himself. His mother had been right all those years ago. Sometimes you did have to draw a line, even when it cost you something. But sometimes that line became the foundation for something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The next day, as his plane lifted off from Ghanaian soil, Elias gazed out the window at the receding landscape. A flight attendant approached, offering a welcome beverage. "Enjoying the view, sir?" she asked. "Very much," Elias replied. "There's something special about seeing the world from above. It gives you perspective." She nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I love about this job. Every day we're literally rising above." As the aircraft climbed into the cloudless blue sky, Elias thought about all the people who would never know his name, but whose lives were different because of the stand he had taken. Passengers who would be treated with dignity, employees who would be valued for their skills rather than judged by their appearance, and future generations who would grow up in a world where such basic decency was expected rather than exceptional. "They threw me off their plane," he murmured, too quietly for anyone else to hear, "but I built my own, and I made sure it had room for everyone." The plane banked gently, catching the sunlight on its wings as it continued its ascent into the limitless sky. What price are you willing to pay to stand against injustice when the system itself feels unmovable? Elias Ward's story reminds us that sometimes dignity demands more than silence. If this journey from discrimination to transformation moved you, Please like and subscribe for more stories that challenge our world and imagine better possibilities.